Why is this the last chance for NASA's mega rocket and Artemis 1? The first and second booster components of Artemis 1 became integrated on January 7, 2021. Once two parts became connected, the solid rocket boosters can only be assembled for about a year, according to NASA. Therefore, it has been exactly 23 months, or about 2 years. NASA may opt to increase the time limit after performing an engineering study. Northrop Grumman announced on September 29, 2021, that the restriction for Artemis 1 can be extended to 18 months based on an analysis of the data acquired as the rockets were being assembled. But 18 months have stretched to 23 months. Artemis 1's launch is long overdue. How will NASA handle this situation? Today, Space Union will explain why this new launch is the last chance for NASA's mega rocket and Artemis 1. Make sure you watch this video until the very end. NASA's Artemis 1 mission headed toward the moon has encountered another potential roadblock that may further postpone its launch. Hurricane-related delays prevented the Space Launch System rocket from launching in November 2022. And now that its solid-state rocket boosters are nearing the end of their usable lifespan, a new problem has arisen. The NASA massive rocket receives its first power from two solid-state rocket boosters, sending an Orion spacecraft and a super heavy fuel tank into the upper atmosphere. Storm Nicole, en route to the Florida Space Coast, has caused several delays, compelled the SLS launch to become postponed from November 14th to November 16th, 2022. It was decided to leave the rocket on Launch Pad 39B since the SLS should be able to withstand winds up to 110 kilometers per hour, which is acceptable, according to the forecast. In addition to being years behind schedule, NASA has another strong justification for delaying the launch of the automated Artemis 1 moon mission. Since the commencement of assembly on the agency's gigantic moon rocket, the amount of time the Space Launch System rocket can stay on Earth before NASA needs to request extensions on safety requirements on the moon rocket gear has been declining. Like most things in life, rocket parts have a shelf life. As NASA prepares for the third attempt to launch Artemis 1 in November, the space agency will need to keep a watch on critical forthcoming lifespan milestones. The Space Launch System faces numerous deadlines as a result of its deterioration. The Orion spacecraft has been fully loaded onto the SLS, which weighs around 5.75 million pounds since October 2021. This also holds for the fueling and solid rocket booster extensions provided. Using two side solid rocket boosters, or SRBs, and a core stage with RS-25 engines, NASA's moon rocket delivers 8.8 million pounds of thrust at liftoff to enter orbit. NASA reports that Northrop Grumman's 177-foot-tall side solid rocket boosters weighing around 1.6 million pounds have been piling since March 2021. Just in time for NASA's planned attempt to launch the SLS and Orion spacecraft on the Artemis 1 test voyage around the moon, NASA managers have confirmed that the solid rocket booster's lifespan will expire in December. Each lost chance pulls the expiration dates of the Space Launch System's many components closer together. For instance, if the mission doesn't launch before December, one of the crucial components, the twin rocket boosters, might not operate. According to Cliff Lanham, Senior Vehicle Operations Manager for the Kennedy Space Center ground system, when the first section became assembled onto the AFT segment, a clock started. It was at first 12 months, and it's currently being investigated for up to 23 months. The first component expires on December 9th of this year, while the second one expires on December 14th, 2022. Jim Free, Associate Administrator of the Exploration Systems Development Mission Directorate at NASA's headquarters in Washington, D.C., stated that if Artemis 1 has not launched by those dates, further analysis would be needed to determine if the expiration dates of the rocket's components should be extended or not. The officials claim that these warnings are based on recent inspection of the rocket's components. Then they would conduct another examination to determine whether the expiration dates be extended after the previously mentioned period. Each of the components has a unique revisit date, which is the moment we must conduct the analysis and look over the analysis's underlying premises. Jim Free said, "I believe it's more of a question of when do we feel that those assumptions aren't working, and the boosters come into that category. If I said we could keep going forever, I think I would be doing our team and you a disservice because I don't think that's the reality. Every time we examine something, we do so through a different set of lenses and take into account what else might have been different. The Boeing-built orange core stage of the SLS can only be refueled using a limited amount of supercold propellant. NASA's reevaluated the situation and concluded that the core stage can be refueled about twice as often as the original restriction, which was roughly 9 times. The core stage has already received 4 tanks of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen fuel for launches or testing at the Kennedy Space Center. Before departing for Florida, the core stage received 700,000 gallons of cryogenic fuel for 2 hot fire tests at NASA's Stennis Space Center in Mississippi. These tests involve firing the RS-25 engines. Due to safety considerations, SLS hardware has an extended time frame. Before we proceed, if you enjoy content like this, please like this video and subscribe to this channel to receive more in-depth updates. The Flight Termination System certification, which guarantees that if the rocket deviates from its intended path, it will explode and not endanger the public, starts to expire once the SLS is on the launch pad. There must be a flight termination system on every rocket. On November 4th, the SLS was moved to Launch Pad 39B at Kennedy Space Center in anticipation of the most recent launch attempt. According to the United States Space Force, the flight termination system batteries need to be changed every 25 days. NASA received a waiver to extend the deadline when it sought to launch the rocket once again in September. Due to the hurricane, the SLS had to be wheeled back into the vehicle assembly building. The batteries were replaced at the hangar and now have a 25-day lifespan. The flight termination system batteries are on each stage of the rocket, but the SLS core stage, according to NASA's SLS chief engineer, John Blevins, is the heart of the system. The Orion spacecraft and the SLS rocket are stacked at the Florida Kennedy Space Center, where Storm Nicole is approaching. Current plans for the Artemis 1 to launch on November 16th at 11:34 IST, with a backup window on November 19th, 2022. The Orion spacecraft will fly to and from the moon if the launch is successful. The Artemis mission, which would see people return to the moon in 2025 or 2026, close to the lunar South Pole, with the eventual goal of building a permanent facility there, will officially begin with the launch. To further emphasize how severe this problem is, consider astronauts who are willing and able to accept huge personal risks. This does not give their top officers the free rein to endanger the lives of valiant warriors who serve our country. This is not an excuse for the international construction of unsafe launch systems for contractor or political benefit. There have been 17 astronaut fatalities in spaceflight mishaps, plus a few more in training disasters caused by organizational errors. There was no fair cause casualty. Instead, crew and missions were lost for stupid reasons that were virtually always known in advance and ignored. Forcing the language of posthumous heroism on these victims, in my opinion, taints their memory by deceptively concealing the responsibility of those who caused these tragedies. As a result, we hope that NASA will soon have a safe alternative to the tinfoil rocket, which is recognized as a death trap waiting to happen. And that brings us to the end of this video. At this rate, do you think the Artemis 1 mission will be successful? Let us know in the comment section. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click on that notification bell to get notified when we post a new video.